My neighbor's basement door has been open for 2 weeks, and now I know why. I moved to a quiet little town in Oregon, hoping for a fresh start. Peace and quiet, the whole deal. Everything was fine at first, until I noticed something weird about the house across the street. My neighbor, this reclusive guy named Ronald, has had his basement door slightly open every night for the past 2 weeks. Just enough to notice. Just enough to make you wonder. At first, I thought it was nothing. But the longer I watched, the more I realized something wasn't right. And last night, I finally went over there. I wish I hadn't. Moving to Crescent Hill, Oregon, was supposed to be my fresh start. I'd grown tired of the chaos of Portland, so finding this small, picturesque town seemed like winning the lottery. My new home was cozy, a modest 2-story house nestled in a quiet neighborhood surrounded by tall pines. It had everything I wanted: a front porch, a neat little yard, and neighbors who smiled and waved as I unpacked my belongings. I'd barely finished unloading the truck when I first felt something off, though. It was subtle, a creeping sensation on the back of my neck that someone was watching me. I glanced around, seeing only peaceful homes and neatly trimmed lawns. That's when my eyes fell on the house directly across from mine. It was older, paint faded from years of neglect, and it seemed darker than the others, even though the sunlight bathed the entire street. The curtains were drawn tight, except for one small gap. I squinted, trying to see if someone was there, but shadows obscured any clear view. Shrugging it off as paranoia from being in an unfamiliar place, I turned back to finish unloading. But throughout the day, every time I looked toward that house, I had the unsettling feeling that whoever was behind that gap in the curtains hadn't moved an inch and hadn't stopped watching me. The first time I actually saw Ronald up close was the morning after I'd moved in. I was checking my mailbox when I heard the creaking sound of his front door. Turning my head, I finally got a clear look at him. He was probably in his early 50s, thin, with graying hair that fell messily over a pale, gaunt face. He moved awkwardly, as if uncomfortable in his own skin. Trying to be friendly, I raised my hand and called out, "Morning, I'm new here, just moved in yesterday." He paused abruptly, frozen mid-step, and slowly turned his head toward me. The look in his eyes immediately sent a chill down my spine. They were wide, bloodshot, and darted around nervously, never fully meeting mine. "Nice to meet you," I added, softer now, uneasy under his stare. He didn't answer. Instead, his lips twitched slightly, like he was trying to speak but couldn't force the words out. After several uncomfortable seconds, he simply turned away, shuffled down his driveway, and disappeared around the side of his house without a single word. As I watched him go, my stomach tightened. Something about Ronald felt deeply unsettling. I couldn't shake the feeling that his silence wasn't just rude. It felt intentional, as if he was afraid speaking to me might reveal something he desperately wanted to keep hidden. It started about a week after moving in. Every evening, as I walked my dog down the quiet streets, I'd pass Ronald's house, and I couldn't help but notice the basement door at the side of his house was always slightly ajar. Initially, I figured he'd forgotten to close it. Maybe he was just forgetful or airing out a damp basement, but then it became routine. Every night around midnight, I'd glance from my bedroom window and see that same door cracked open. Even stranger, when morning came, it was always closed again, as if nothing had happened. After 2 full weeks, curiosity turned into concern. I couldn't shake the feeling that it was intentional, like an invitation, or perhaps a warning. One evening, driven by a growing unease, I watched carefully from behind my blinds, waiting to catch Ronald in the act. But I never saw him open or close it. The door simply remained partially open, offering only darkness within. The longer this went on, the more my imagination ran wild. I couldn't understand why someone as visibly paranoid as Ronald would repeatedly leave a basement door open unless there was a reason. Something inside he needed to escape quickly from, or maybe something he wanted to lure inside. It wasn't long before I realized my peaceful new neighborhood had begun to feel a lot less safe, and that open basement door was at the heart of my growing anxiety. A few nights later, just as I was drifting off to sleep, I heard it. The first muffled cry. At first, I convinced myself it was just a stray cat, or maybe the wind playing tricks on me. But soon, the noises grew clearer. Distant sobs, soft cries, sometimes even what sounded like someone pleading quietly. Each night they grew louder, more distinct. My bedroom window faced Ronald's house, and the silence of Crescent Hill amplified every small sound. I'd lie awake, heart racing, trying to rationalize it away. Maybe a television, a nightmare, anything else. But deep down, I knew something was terribly wrong. One particular night, curiosity overcame fear, and I quietly opened my window, leaning out slightly to listen closely. The sounds were unmistakably human, soft, anguished cries echoing faintly from the direction of Ronald's basement door, still hauntingly ajar. Panic surged through me. I desperately wanted to call someone, but fear held me back. I spent the rest of that night sleepless, staring at my ceiling, my mind spiraling with dark possibilities. Every part of me wanted to believe I was imagining it, but the echoes of those helpless cries made denial impossible. Something was trapped in Ronald's basement, and I feared it was something human. It wasn't long before Crescent Hill's peaceful charm was overshadowed by whispers and worried looks among neighbors. First, it was just pets. Cats and dogs vanished overnight. Missing posters filled telephone poles and bulletin boards, each animal's photo serving as a grim reminder that something unsettling was taking root in town. Then, Emily disappeared. She was a waitress at the local diner, just 19, bright and cheerful, the kind who memorized your coffee order after your first visit. One day, she simply didn't show up for her shift, and soon, her face joined the posters alongside lost pets. The entire community was rattled. People started locking their doors at night and checking in on each other frequently. And through it all, Ronald changed noticeably. He became even more withdrawn, never leaving his house during the day anymore. On the rare occasion I spotted him outside late at night, he moved quickly, eyes darting anxiously around the street, as if expecting to be followed or caught. I watched him from my window, noticing how his basement door, still ominously open each night, now seemed darker, like a silent mouth keeping horrible secrets. Deep down, I couldn't shake a terrifying thought. Ronald's strange behavior wasn't coincidence. He knew something, maybe even had something to do with the disappearances. And I felt increasingly certain that Emily's absence was somehow connected to the shadowy basement across the street. The moment that erased any remaining doubt came around 2 a.m. one sleepless night. I sat near my window, unable to shake the feeling that something terrible was happening next door. Just as exhaustion nearly overtook me, movement caught my eye. Ronald appeared from the shadows beside his driveway, dragging something heavy, wrapped tightly in a large black garbage bag, toward his basement door. My heart froze. The bag was large enough to contain a body, and as he struggled with it, I clearly saw dark, wet stains smearing across the plastic. I held my breath, my fingers gripping the windowsill so tightly they turned white. Then, as if sensing my gaze, Ronald suddenly stopped. His head snapped up, his wide, wild eyes locking directly onto mine through the gap in my curtains. My blood ran cold. For a few terrifying seconds, neither of us moved. His eyes narrowed, clearly aware I'd witnessed something I shouldn't have. Without breaking eye contact, he slowly finished pulling the bag into the darkness of the basement, leaving the door slightly ajar once again, as if daring me to come closer. I backed away from the window, heart pounding, my hand shaking uncontrollably. There was no denying it now. Ronald knew I was watching him, and whatever horrible secrets he hid were now dangerously intertwined with me. I went to the Crescent Hill police station early the next morning, unable to shake the image of Ronald dragging that stained bag into his basement. I explained everything I'd seen, his strange behavior, the open basement door, the late-night cries, and especially the suspicious incident from the night before. The officer, a tired-looking man named Deputy Collins, listened quietly but with clear skepticism. "You have any real proof of this?" he asked, sighing heavily. "Photos? Videos? Anything concrete?" I hesitated. "No, but I swear, something's very wrong." Collins shook his head slowly, giving me a sympathetic but dismissive look. "Look, I get you're worried, but we can't just barge into someone's home based on suspicion alone. Ronald's a little odd, sure, but he's never hurt anyone. Without solid evidence, my hands are tied." I left the station feeling utterly defeated but determined. If the police wouldn't help, I'd have to do it myself. That evening, armed with nothing but a flashlight and my phone ready to record, I made up my mind. I had to know what Ronald was hiding behind that basement door, even if it meant facing whatever waited for me in that darkness alone. The following night, long after the neighborhood fell silent, I crept quietly around Ronald's property, phone recording and flashlight trembling slightly in my sweaty grip. My pulse hammered in my ears as I navigated toward his backyard, hidden from the street by dense bushes. In the dirt near his back porch, My flashlight beam illuminated bizarre footprints, deep, uneven marks, as if someone had dragged something heavy. As I followed them further, my stomach twisted violently. Near the corner of his property, partially concealed beneath damp leaves, I discovered a torn piece of clothing, a bloodied fragment of denim, disturbingly similar to what Emily always wore at the diner. Next to the bloodied cloth, small white fragments gleamed in the dirt. Shaking, I knelt down for a closer look, then recoiled sharply. They were bones, tiny, splintered, and unmistakably real. A wave of nausea overcame me as panic clawed at my chest. My breath came in rapid, shallow gasps, vision blurred by fear. I stumbled back toward my house, barely managing to steady myself. That night, sleep came in fragments, punctuated by vivid nightmares of Ronald's crazed eyes and desperate cries emanating from beneath his home. Despite the terror gripping me, giving up wasn't an option. Not anymore. Ronald had secrets darker than I'd imagined, and now it felt like only I could expose them. Driven by an urgent need for answers, I spent the next few days obsessively researching Ronald's past. I searched online, combed through old records, and eventually stumbled onto disturbing clues buried in obscure newspaper articles from nearly 10 years ago. Ronald had once lived in a small town in Idaho, and shortly before he left, his wife and older brother both died under mysterious circumstances. Officially, authorities listed the deaths as accidents. His wife drowned, his brother fell down a staircase, but rumors suggested otherwise. Digging deeper, I discovered a pattern. Wherever Ronald went, disappearances soon followed. Pets vanished first, then people, usually young, vulnerable, and alone. But each time, police investigations stalled due to a lack of concrete evidence. Chills crawled down my spine as I stared at grainy old photos of Ronald, standing emotionless beside grieving family members, eyes hollow and unreadable. Everything pointed to one terrifying conclusion. Ronald wasn't merely odd or misunderstood. He'd been hiding something monstrous for years, leaving a trail of unanswered questions and tragedy behind him. Now he lived across the street from me, and I knew exactly why he kept his basement door cracked open. Ronald's cycle was repeating, and Crescent Hill was his newest hunting ground. 2 weeks of watching, waiting, and living in fear finally pushed me past the breaking point. Late that night, armed only with my flashlight and a desperate need for answers, I slipped quietly across the empty street. Ronald's basement door, still open as always, seemed darker and more inviting than ever, like a mouth waiting patiently to swallow me whole. I took a deep breath and stepped inside, immediately overwhelmed by the smell of decay and mold. The beam from my flashlight trembled, dancing across the concrete walls, revealing bizarre symbols drawn crudely in red and black paint. Symbols I didn't recognize, but instantly felt sickened by. At the center of the room was something that looked like an altar, covered in dried blood, animal bones, and candles melted down to nothing but waxy puddles. Chains hung ominously from the ceiling, rusted and stained. Beside the altar, a small table held twisted metal tools, their sharp edges caked with something dark and dried. My pulse quickened, and bile rose in my throat, but before panic could fully seize me, my flashlight caught sight of something else. A narrow, hidden door, partially concealed behind a filthy curtain in the far corner. Swallowing hard, I moved closer, heart pounding with each hesitant step. Reaching out with shaking fingers, I pulled back the curtain and opened the door. A wave of cold, putrid air rushed out, nearly choking me as I stared into a darkness that felt alive. I stepped forward, shining my flashlight inside, and instantly wished I hadn't. The beam of my flashlight pierced through the darkness, revealing a small, hidden room, a filthy, damp cell carved crudely into the earth. My heart stopped at what I saw next. People, alive but barely recognizable, chained to the walls, faces pale and hollow, eyes sunken from exhaustion and fear. In the corner, slumped but breathing, was Emily, her tear-streaked face swollen and bruised. She lifted her head weakly, eyes widening with disbelief as they met mine. "Oh my God, please, help us," she croaked, her voice breaking with desperation. I rushed forward, adrenaline surging, fumbling desperately with the chains. "I'm getting you out of here," I whispered frantically, hands trembling uncontrollably. Suddenly, from upstairs came the unmistakable creak of footsteps, heavy and deliberate. Ronald had returned, and he knew someone was inside. Panic shot through me like electricity, as the captives around me whimpered in terror. Emily grasped my arm tightly, her voice a frightened whisper. "He's coming." I spun around, heart racing wildly, knowing I had only moments to make a life-or-death decision. Ronald's slow footsteps descended toward the basement, growing louder with every heartbeat, and now there was nowhere left to run. Ronald burst through the basement doorway, eyes wild and filled with a horrifying blend of rage and madness. His voice erupted in an anguished shriek, echoing off the concrete walls. "You shouldn't have come here. They demand sacrifice. I'm saving us all." He lunged toward me, gripping a rusty metal pipe, swinging it violently. Pure instinct drove me to dodge, and the pipe slammed hard against the wall, sparks scattering into the darkness. I tackled him, wrestling desperately to get the weapon away. His strength, fueled by madness, overwhelmed me as he pinned me against the damp floor, his face inches from mine, spittle flying from his lips. "They chose me," Ronald hissed, eyes bloodshot, vacant. "This is their will." Behind him, Emily struggled to her feet, chains clinking heavily. With a burst of courage born from desperation, she grabbed one of Ronald's tools from the table, a twisted blade, and thrust it into his shoulder. Ronald howled in pain, loosening his grip just enough for me to break free. Together, the captives surged forward, weakened but driven by survival, clawing at their tormentor with every ounce of strength left in them. Ronald fought back furiously, screaming incoherent prayers as we grappled him to the floor, finally restraining him with his own chains. Exhausted, breathing heavily, we stood over him as he continued to mumble twisted words about divine purpose and sacrifice. In that chilling moment, staring into Ronald's crazed eyes, I realized how close we'd come to becoming just another set of missing faces on a forgotten poster. Within minutes of my frantic 911 call, sirens pierced the quiet night, filling the neighborhood with flashing red and blue lights. Officers burst into Ronald's basement, eyes widening in horror at the nightmare we'd uncovered. Ronald was dragged away, still ranting about higher powers and sacrifices, his twisted words echoing into the night. Paramedics gently freed Emily and the others, wrapping blankets around their frail, trembling bodies as neighbors gathered outside, stunned into silence. The quiet town of Crescent Hill, once safe and welcoming, watched in disbelief as the victims emerged from Ronald's dark basement, faces everyone recognized from missing posters, alive but forever changed. In the days that followed, news of Ronald's horrifying crimes spread quickly, shaking our small community to its core. People whispered in shock and disbelief at local coffee shops, churches, and grocery stores, unable to comprehend how something so monstrous had occurred right under their noses. Yet, amid the relief and sorrow, I felt no peace, only an unshakable dread. Ronald was gone, but the chilling memory of his madness lingered, haunting every street, every shadow, and every dream I had. Life after Ronald's arrest never returned to normal, at least not for me. Even months later, the nightmares haven't stopped. I still wake up drenched in sweat, gasping for air, trapped by memories of chains, bloodied tools, and Ronald's hollow, insane eyes staring deep into mine. I started therapy, desperately hoping to leave my fears behind. But talking about it only seemed to amplify my anxiety, making me hyper-aware of everyone around me. Trusting others became impossible. Every new neighbor felt suspicious, every shadow hiding something sinister. Eventually, I gave up and tried to move away, thinking distance would heal me. But no matter where I went, big cities or quiet towns, the darkness followed. Ronald was gone, locked away forever, yet somehow he lingered inside me like a shadow clinging to my soul. Now, I understand something terrifying. Some experiences never truly end. They just bury themselves deep, waiting quietly, patiently for the perfect moment to come crawling back to the surface. The authorities sealed off Ronald's house weeks after his arrest. Boards cover the windows, yellow tape flutters around the basement entrance, and no one goes near it. It stands like a scar on the neighborhood, a grim reminder of what was hidden behind its walls. And yet, some nights, I still see it. In my dreams, I find myself standing across the street, just like I did all those nights before. The moonlight spills over the sidewalk, the wind is silent, and that basement door, long sealed shut in reality, slowly begins to open again. No sound, just darkness inside. A silence so deep, it hums in my bones. Sometimes I see movement in that darkness. Sometimes I hear the faint sound of chains dragging or whispering. Whispers that feel like they're meant just for me. I wake up staring at my bedroom window, heart pounding, convinced the door is open again, that Ronald, or something worse, has returned. I know it's just a dream, I tell myself that every time, but a small part of me wonders, what if the evil in that basement never left? What if it's still there, patient and quiet, waiting for someone new to forget to look away?
Thank you for watching to the end. If you enjoyed the video, please leave a comment and like it. It will help us grow. Until next time in the next video, bye.